5 tips for avoiding employee burnout. I'd like to talk to you about employee burnout, and I'd like to give you 5 tips for handling employee burnout in the best possible way. A lot of leaders are dealing with employees these days that are just burned out. We have kids working from home. There are a lot of changes within the company, a lot of changes in the home front, and so people feel overwhelmed. People feel that they just can't produce so much. And so when you're dealing with a team member who is experiencing a burnout, they would typically be slower to respond, slower to produce. Being in a burnout state means that every step seems like climbing a mountain. There's just so much that you can do. And so you get slower and slower and slower and less efficient. There are specific things that leaders can do in order to help team members that are experiencing a burnout. And so if you're dealing with an employee that seems to you that are slower to respond, slower to produce, down, not the team member that you're used to working with, here are 5 tips for you in order to handle the situation. The first tip is to understand the workload for that team members. A lot of times leaders are not fully clear on what the workload is for each and every member. Some team members take on the workloads of others. Some assume some responsibilities. Sometimes leaders are not 100% clear on the complexity of some of the tasks and the complexity of dealing with some of the clients or some of the accounts. So the first thing you should do is get really clear on what the workload is, and you do that by asking questions. Once you are clear on what the workload is, you can delegate the workload in a way so that someone who is experiencing a burnout would have a little bit less to do while they recover. Someone else can take more of the load. The second tip has to do with clarity, and clarity is the best thing that leaders can do for their team members, because when you are not clear on what you are asking your people to do, you're really confusing them. And for people who are experiencing a burnout, for people who feel that it's harder for them to produce, when they also have to figure out what you mean and what exactly you expect, it just makes it so much harder. And so the best thing that you can do for them is to get really clear in your instructions and to make sure that they fully understand what you want, when you want it by, and what exactly you expect. And sometimes the leaders themselves are going through burnout. The leaders themselves are tired and overworked and overwhelmed. And so to get really clear, you may want to write down exactly what you expect of your team. Make sure that it's clear to you before you give them any instructions. The third very important tip when you're dealing with someone who is in a burnout state is to prioritize. If there are a certain amount of things that someone needs to do a day, you expect your team member to produce or to submit or whatever it may be, some of those things are probably much more important than others. Someone who is overwhelmed, someone who is in a burnout state would have a very hard time prioritizing because everything seems overwhelming and everything seems difficult to do. And so the best thing you can do for them is that you can help them prioritize, and you can do that by helping them take quick 2-second decisions. You do that by scaling. You look at the tasks and you scale together. You say, listen, this is a 10, this is a 10, this is a 2, this is a 6. I want you to focus on the 10s. I want you to focus on the things that matter the most to our team. And so if that person is just able to do that much because they're burned out at a given time, at least they will be focusing on the things that matter the most and will not be spending major time on minor things. The fourth tip is that you need to manage your own stress, because a lot of times what happens is that the leaders themselves are going through burnout. They are stressed. They themselves are dealing with working from home and the stress in their own personal life and all the change that they need to manage at work. And so what we get is overwhelmed leaders leading overwhelmed team members. And that is not what you want to see. And so in order to care for others, the first thing you need to do is to care for yourself. You need to manage your own stress. You need to take care of your own well-being. Once you are calm, once you took care of yourself, once you've prioritized your well-being, then you are in a position to lead others. And if you feel that you are so overwhelmed and so burnt out that you just can't be in a position to lead and be patient and be accepting with someone else today, then do less today, take care of yourself, and do more tomorrow. The fifth tip that I'd like to talk to you about has to do with empowering and supporting your team members. Nothing works better for someone who is overwhelmed, for someone who is burned out, than empowerment. One kind word, one kind sentence, something that will make them feel good about themselves. Something good that you saw, that you recognize in their efforts, will make all the difference in the world. The best gift that you can do when someone is overwhelmed, because being overwhelmed is being in a state of pain. There's very little that you can do. You can do so much, but right now you can do so little. And so when you empower someone with recognition, with being thankful for what they do, you give them the power and the strength to rebuild their strength to the point that they are once again who they are, and they produce what they are capable of producing.